Good morning and welcome to the webinar. We're so glad that you're able to join us. We recognize that many of you may be working from home or under various unique circumstances, as are we, so we appreciate your being here and we're grateful that you're able to participate. Before we get started, we just want to cover a few housekeeping items. First, this webinar is produced by the CATA project, a project of the Center for Innovation and Resources Incorporated. Funding for this project comes from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, or Cal-OES. For those of you who can hear me right now, this probably seems obvious, but to anyone who may still have their sound turned off or muted, this is a visual reminder that you must turn on your sound to hear the presentation. Please note that there are two features to ask questions throughout the webinar. Use the Q&A feature to ask the presenter any questions that you may have regarding content. We may ask those questions during the presentation, or they may be asked at the end. We will also get to the questions that you all submitted upon registration. You may ask questions anonymously by checking the anonymous box on the Q&A feature. The chat panel is where you can ask tech support questions. We will answer questions as immediately as possible in the chat panel. We are offering CEUs for this webinar for MFTs and LCSWs. At the end of the course, you will be prompted to fill out a general evaluation. Once you complete that, you will be redirected to a second evaluation, application, and payment form. Please complete those if you are interested in CEUs. If you happen to have any issues with applying for CEUs, please use the email address in the original email that you got to register for the webinar, and we will help troubleshoot any questions. I'd like to briefly introduce our trainer for today. Tanisha Fulcher has over 12 years of experience working with foster children and families involved with the systems of care. She values cultural differences and believes that many life issues should be viewed through a cultural lens. Tanisha received a BS in biochemistry from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, and an MS in marriage and family therapy from Northwestern University in Illinois. She is currently working on a doctorate of psychology with a concentration in clinical psychology from the Behavioral Sciences Department of Southern California Seminary in El Cajon, California. And I want to thank her because we did have a last-minute tech issue, of course, so she switched computers very quickly while I was doing the intro. So if you'll give us just a minute, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give the controls over to Tanisha.
Thank you, Allie, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out to attend this webinar today on such an important topic. So I do have some poll questions that I'll be asking throughout the training, throughout the webinar, and you can answer them anonymously. So not even myself or Allie will have access to know who answered the question in what manner. So I just want to be sure that you know that. So we'll go ahead and get started. The intersection of hair care and self-esteem for Black foster youth, considering historical, contemporary, and personal trauma. Starting with our first poll question, just to kind of get an idea of the audience, I would like to know which best describes you in terms of your employment. So if you can select which one best describes you, and then we will review the responses once they're all in. And Allie, if you can share the results with us once they're in. So it looks like most are with the Child Protection Agency and also placement. We do third, community-based organization. Okay, so we do have a few with juvenile probation and school staff, private practice as well, and other. And we do have some foster parents. Awesome. Okay. And so I do have another question that I'll ask now. Why are you here today? What prompted you to register and attend this training? And you can select all that applies to you. You can select more than one answer. So we have all right, majority, or at least a bit more than half have a general interest in the topic and also want to improve their practice, which is great, and also have foster youth or foster parents that would benefit from this information. Just a slight, a low number were mandated by their employer. And okay, thank you so much for your input. That is good information to have. So we'll go ahead and get started. So during our time together here today, we will review, I have a slogan for today. We'll discuss foster youth rights and the recent upgrade in those rights. And we'll discuss their trauma experience, the psychological impact of self-esteem, especially in relation to foster youth. We'll discuss the overrepresentation of Black children in child welfare. We'll discuss, I'll also help deepen your understanding of the Black experience. We'll discuss cultural responsiveness and the importance of cultural responsiveness and what that looks like in action. And then we'll review some next steps that you can take. And I have a few resources listed. So our slogan for today is hair care is an important part of hygiene. Hygiene impacts your self-esteem, and self-esteem is foundational to your identity. So keeping that in mind, that self-esteem can affect your mood, it can affect your perception of yourself, as well as your perception of how others see you and the way that you interact with others. So I do have another poll question. For you personally, at what age is your earliest memory of having a bad hair day? Now, I know that's a universal experience, regardless of what race or culture you are. At what age, if you can remember, is your earliest memory of having a bad hair day? So if we can, just to kind of get us thinking about our own experiences in regards to hair, so that we can keep that in mind as we move through and discuss Black foster youth and their experience. So looks like majority, or at least almost half, your earliest memory is from 7 to 9 years old. That's young, and some even as young as 4. That's really young. And you know, the teenage years, I see there's quite a few of you with a good number of you, your earliest memories from your teenage years, and we all know that that can be a vulnerable time for all of us. So that's just good to keep in mind when we think about our foster youth as well. So in regards to foster youth rights, when we think about our foster youth rights, you know, foster youth have many rights that they either aren't aware of, that even social workers may not be aware of, or those who are in place to care for them and advocate for them. There are some rights that we may not be aware of because we kind of focus and prioritize the most important ones, of course, right? Contact with their family and relatives, school of origin, medical care, mental health needs. But Governor Newsom, the governor of California, late last year signed into a law which became effective January 1 of this year, that foster youth have the right to receive adequate and healthy food, adequate clothing, grooming, hygiene, and hygiene products, and an age-appropriate allowance. More specifically, they have the right to they have a right to have clothing and grooming and hygiene products that respect their culture and ethnicity, as well as their gender identity and expression. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when we are working with our foster youth, and more specifically, our topic here today, Black foster youth, that they do have the right to receive their products that they need for their hair, and the appropriate grooming as well for their hair, which is law. Now, what does implementation of that look like? That is something that can be, that will vary across counties and depending on the needs and the population, but it is something to keep in mind because it is important. So in regards to the trauma experience of foster youth, they are survivors of various forms of abuse, neglect, or both. The incidents of abuse or neglect can be traumatic experiences for them, and placement in foster care can also be a traumatic experience, as I'm sure most of you know. And 25%, so 1 out of every 4 foster youth, if not more, experience post-traumatic stress disorder. So that means that they may experience issues with sleeping, they may experience nightmares, they may experience flashbacks, anxiety. There may be things in their environment or out in the community that are triggers for them. And so keeping that in mind when working with our foster youth is important, because their behaviors or their response to us, or we may not understand, but keeping that in mind that it may be related to the fact that they are dealing with these mental health symptoms is important in our ability to serve them. Foster youth also tend to experience high rates of severe depression and low self-esteem. And self-esteem, persons with low self-esteem are more susceptible to develop depression. So our foster youth who are experiencing low self-esteem, that's something to keep on our radar and inquiring about their mental health and how that is impacting their mental health. And also note that self-esteem has greater impact on a youth's suicide risk when the youth has low family support, which definitely applies to most of our foster youth. So low self-esteem can also result in externalizing behaviors. So they may exhibit aggression, antisocial behavior, and delinquency. Now, of course, there are other factors that attribute to externalizing behaviors, but understanding that low self-esteem can be one of them is something that we should keep in the forefront of our minds, and that not only do they need mental health services to address maybe issues of attachment or whatever trauma they've experienced due to abuse or neglect, but also keeping in mind their need for being uplifted and for being affirmed. That's very important, not just from, and we don't expect that just from their biological families, which may not happen, but also from those that are caring for them and for the service providers as well, just affirming their identity, affirming who they are individually, as individuals. Youth with low self-esteem are more likely to be at risk of delinquent behaviors. And as we know, foster youth are more likely to be a part of this population. And so it may be helpful to address the issues of self-esteem with our foster youth. And this can be done with mentorship, getting them involved in extracurricular activities in which they feel a sense of achievement and a sense of, they feel competent and confident. So when we think about overrepresentation or the disproportionality and disparity in child welfare, disproportionality exists when the proportion of one group in CWS is larger than the proportion of that same group in the larger population. And so more specifically in San Diego County, which is where I am, there is a disproportionate number of Black children involved with CWS in comparison to the number of Black children in the total population of San Diego County. So they're overrepresented in the child welfare system because it's larger than the total population. And that's an issue nationally, not just in San Diego, not just in California. Disparity refers to the unequal outcomes experienced by one racial or ethnic group compared to the outcomes of another. So in more specifically with CWS, there is disparity in the various outcomes of Black children involved with CWS, such as assignment of referrals for investigation, their removal from their biological families, reunification, and permanency. And so these are some statistics and data from 2016 for the County of San Diego. And these numbers are also available across the entire state and for each individual county. So if you look at this table, if you look at the children with entries, those who are entered into foster care, and the incidents per 1,000. So they, now Native Americans have the highest rate here, and the Black foster youth have the second highest here with 6.6. Even though our population is lower in the entire county, we have 6 times the number of entries in comparison with other populations listed here on the table. And if you look at this data table shows that Black foster youth are less likely to be placed in with relatives. So if you look here at this row here, Black children have the lowest percentage of being placed with relatives, and Black children are more likely to be placed in out-of-home care, whether that be foster home, group home, emergency shelter care, etc. And so that's why it's important for us to understand their experience, and especially in regards to hair care, because they are more likely to be placed with a caregiver that does not, who is not educated on how to care for their hair or the importance of it and what it means and how it can impact them. So I have a video here. And actually, before we move forward with this video, I would like to ask another poll question. I would like to get an idea of your experience I would like to get an idea of your experience in regards to this topic. Which best describes you? So if you can just take a quick moment to answer that. And then we'll move forward with the video. Alrighty, I believe there. So we have over half of you are currently working with foster youth or families that would benefit from this information. And some of you already have, some of you do have experience with working with foster youth in the past that would benefit. Some of you don't have any experience, so it's awesome that you are here, and then some of you marked other. So that's awesome, and I hope that you find this information beneficial and that you're able to not only use it to improve your practice or improve your knowledge base so that you can serve this population better, but also so that you can share it with others as well. Okay, so we'll move forward with this video. Let me just make sure that I have the volume set. And there's no words in this, no speaking, it's just music. And you can read the subtitles.
swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.
Alrighty. So just some personal reflections to consider. If there is anything in the video that surprised you, if there was anything that upset you or made you feel uncomfortable, or if you do have any questions or feedback, feel free to share that in the chat box, and if time allows, we can discuss that at the end of the presentation, at the end of the training. Okay, but I wanted to show that just to kind of give a history of Black hair, so that to help you understand, to help deepen your understanding of the experience and the historical trauma and historical experience, and contemporary as well, for our Black foster youth and their families. Because even though they weren't alive back at that time, it does still affect them today. They understand, they hear stories from their biological families. It impacts them today. Just those ideals, and just as racism continues today, and we have the current issues going on with the protests and the police brutality, and children are aware of those things, even if they're not out there. They are impacted by what the current events, and they hear the conversations that are taking place amongst their caregivers, those around them, and children talk about it amongst each other, and they're also impacted and influenced by the opinions and attitudes of their families. So they do come across other children who may discriminate, or who may say derogatory things towards them due to their race and their hair. So let's keep that in mind as well. And so moving forward with the Crown Act, which went into effect January 1 of this year. The governor signed it last year. The Crown Act bans discrimination based on one's natural hair in the workplace and K through 12 public schools. And so this just speaks to the fact that within the Black experience, and not just, I'll say not just the Black population, but other cultures as well, who don't have who don't meet the Eurocentric standards of beauty, that sometimes they can experience discrimination based on their natural hair. And but this law was motivated more so due to the discrimination experienced by Black and biracial persons who have experienced discrimination based on their natural hair at school and in the workplace, not being promoted, or being told that they have to change their hair if they want to be promoted, that it's unprofessional, not being allowed to participate in certain activities. When we consider especially our little girls or teen girls who may want to participate on a dance team or cheerleading, and they wear their hair in certain hairstyles that may not be accommodating or complimentive of Black hair, or how that particular child wears their hair. And so advocating for your foster youth in those arenas is very important, because they most likely will not have the confidence to advocate for themselves. So cultural responsiveness. What is cultural responsiveness, and why is it important? Cultural responsiveness involves knowing your culture and how it impacts your understanding of other people's culture and way of life. So knowing your own culture and understanding how it influences your perspective. Does it give you, are you more judgmental towards different cultures and their way of doing things? And just being mindful of that. And cultural responsiveness involves deepening your understanding of other people and understanding the reasons behind the choices that they make. So the more you expose yourself to other cultures and understanding other cultures and the way that they do things, it helps you to keep more of a flexible mind frame and frame of reference in regards to other cultures and people who do things different from you. So if you're a foster parent, a resource parent, and you have a foster child come in your home who's of a different culture, and you may have to do visits with that family, or just having that child come into your home, being mindful of the language that you use when you describe their clothing or their rituals or especially our topic today, their hair, is really important. And so exposing yourself to these various cultures, whether you're doing research on the laptop or just going out to different festivals, speaking with friends or colleagues that you may be a part of that culture, and just asking, just getting information about how, their experience can be helpful with just keeping an open mind and being more accepting, and being more inquisitive instead of assuming. Cultural responsiveness involves recognizing others as individuals and effectively communicating with them based on their individual needs in order to provide culturally appropriate services. And so it also involves identifying and utilizing community resources on behalf of that person. So we do have to advocate for our foster youth. And so, you know, as a professional, that is likely already a part of your duties, advocating for the youth and families that you serve. But as a foster parent or resource parent, it's important that that you do the same. It's very even more important because you're their direct caregiver and you spend the most time with them. And so learning how to do that, which starts on the inside with yourself and being comfortable with that. And if you don't know something, being okay to, you know, feeling okay with asking. And also in regards to probation, you know, I know that especially in detention facilities, on the delinquency side, that environment is a bit different because there's, you know, although I know California is making some changes, I know Haircare is not at the top of the list, but just keeping in mind that with, you know, with our foster youth, or just with our youth that are even in juvenile hall, understanding that especially for our Black youth or juveniles who may be at the facilities or just on, you know, or maybe in the group homes, keeping in mind that although they are there because they violated the law, violated their probation conditions, when they are not allowed to properly care for their hair, it's not just, you know, an embarrassment thing or, you know, a punishment or, you know, this is where you are, you're not, you know, on vacation. But there is a deeper, there's a deeper level to it, and it impacts them. Excuse me. Excuse me. I apologize. The air is on a bit high in here. Just keep in mind that there's a deeper level to the way that it impacts them, and it's not just about the superficial, you know, attractiveness on the outside, but it does affect their identity and their self-esteem, which can further reinforce their behaviors, their externalizing behaviors. And so moving on, just considering other cultures, I wanted to include this in our culture responsiveness discussion. So there is a movie called Nappily Ever After, and the director of this movie, Haifa Al-Mansour, is from Saudi Arabia. And so she briefly discusses during this interview her experience as a little girl in the 4th grade. And you know, 4th graders are typically around 9 or 10 years old. And so she discusses she explains her hair experience as a little girl growing up in Saudi Arabia. So let's, okay, this one isn't working. All right, so we'll move on. I'll just, for some reason it's not working. I will just explain how it works, or what she stated in the video. So she explained that as a little girl in 4th grade, she would spend a lot of time blow drying her hair straight. And because in her culture, if your hair was not straight, then you would get teased, you would be isolated, and no one would want to play with you. And so she spent a lot of time and was very skilled at straightening, blow drying her hair straight. And she could teach others how to do the same. And so she says in the interview that, you know, as a little girl, 9 or 10 years old, she should have spent more time playing outside and, you know, doing little kid activities instead of having to spend so much time, energy, and attention towards altering the state of her hair in order to fit in at 9 years old. And I know that some of you even listed when I asked earlier about your earliest experience of having a bad hair day, and quite a few of you had it around that age and even younger. So just keeping that in mind of having to put so much time and energy into your hair at such a young age in order to feel accepted amongst your peers. So now I have another video, which is about young Black children and just understanding how they are indoctrinated at a young age that Black is inferior, and that that Black is bad and white is good.
In Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that desegregated schools in the 1950s, Dr. Kenneth Clark conducted a doll test with Black children. He asked them to choose between a Black doll and a white doll. In most instances, the majority of the children preferred the white doll. I decided to reconduct this test as Dr. Clark did to see how we've progressed since then. Can you show me the doll that you like best or that you'd like to play with? This one. I like that one. Okay. This one. That one. I like to play with this. And can you show me the doll that is the nice doll? And why is that the nice doll? She's white. And can you show me the doll that looks bad? Can you give, and why does that look bad? Because it's black. And why do you think that's a nice doll? Because she's white. And can you give me the doll that looks like you? "15 out of the 21 children preferred the white doll."
So as you see at the end of that video, that little girl, she identifies the white doll as being good and the Black doll as being bad because of their race and what they look like. And then when she was asked which one looks like, or which one are you, which one looks like you, she wanted to choose the white doll because that's the good one, right? But then she, when she thought about it, she's like, oh no, I look like this one. So just keep in mind that internal conflict that occurs, and also how even our youngest children are impacted by society, and about these views on how Black is associated with negative attributes. So one way to address that, putting cultural responsiveness into practice, language reframe. So when describing Black hair, instead of saying good hair, which to some may seem like a compliment, right? Good hair. However, within Black culture, that is, it can be considered a compliment, but for the most part, it's a controversial reference. So good hair refers to someone who may have a looser curls, more wavy textured hair instead of the typical average texture of Black hair. And so even though it can be considered a compliment, I encourage others not to use it, and many try to stay away from using that term because it does perpetuate the ideology that Black is inferior. If you do have more coily textured hair, then your hair is not good hair. The good hair is different from that. So instead of saying that someone has good hair, you would say that they have beautiful hair. So instead of saying that a foster youth's hair is nappy, you would say that it's coily or tangled. Nappy is definitely a term that you don't want to use. And although you may hear a foster youth say that about their own hair, but as someone who's caring for them in a different role, we are trying to encourage the use of culturally sensitive language, because the historical context of the word nappy is racist and derogatory. It was used as a racist and derogatory term to describe Black hair. So that is a word that we try to stay away from. And so also, instead of saying that a foster youth's hair is coarse, you can say that it's strong. instead of saying that their hair is high maintenance or too much work. And it may be a lot of work, I agree. But instead of using those words to describe it, you could say that their hair needs special care. And so using this positive strengths-based language can make a difference. It is important because the words that we speak do have an impact on our foster youth's identity and self-esteem. So using this language reframe is one way that we can start making those changes and putting cultural responsiveness into practice. So I have another poll question. At what frequency is it healthy to wash your hair? So with this question, I'm referring to your own personal hair. At what frequency is it best to wash your own hair? How often do you wash your hair? Just to get an idea of the diversity just in our group here today in regards to hair maintenance. And I know that there is a variation. Even within the Black race, there is a variation, but there is somewhat of an average. There are definitely some do's and don'ts. So it looks like almost half wash their hair every other day. About a quarter of you wash your hair once a week, and then daily, and then we have once every 2 weeks. Small percentage once every 3 weeks or monthly. Okay, so as we move forward and think about our Black foster youth, their hair should be washed about once every 1 to 2 weeks. The average is about once every 2 weeks, unless they're engaged in activities such as, swimming or really high active training where they're doing a lot of sweating. Hair should be washed using a moisturizing shampoo and conditioner. So ensuring that they retain moisture in their hair is very important. And their hair oil should be applied to their hair and scalp about once every week or even more frequently, depending on their hair type. And their hair should be combed out at least once per week or more, unless their hair is in a protective style such as braids. So there is some diversity and variety amongst within the with our Black foster youth, depending on the texture of their hair in regards to how their hair care. But these are just some basic hair care tips that you can follow or that you can recommend to the resource parents or if there are any placement staff or group home staff. This is important to keep in mind because it is, as caregivers, whether the foster youth is in a group home or detention facility, they do have rights to have their hair cared for appropriately based on their culture. So this is important to keep in mind. So here are some examples of appropriately groomed hair and some examples where follow-up is needed. So on the left-hand side, we have a picture of a little boy, because this does, although I do mention I've been mentioning our Black foster youth girls, our girls, it also applies to boys as well. So here are some examples. Now on the bottom left, the two at the bottom left, I specifically intentionally chose these examples because to some this may not be obvious that it is appropriately groomed, right? Which I understand. However, some things that you can look for is the little girl on the bottom left, the part in her hair is straight. And for both of them, some consistency throughout their hair. So it's sort of like a pattern, which kind of lets you know that it was done intentionally. Now, some may wear their hair out and it may be appropriately groomed, but there may not be consistency or a pattern because that's just how their hair naturally is. But when you look at these pictures on the right, in terms of cleanliness or how long do you think it may have gone without being combed out? So just asking some follow-up questions so you don't have to come in and be judgmental about what it looks like. which, you know, unless you're a bit more experienced in this area, you can be more forthcoming. But just asking some follow-up questions first, like, how often do you wash her hair? And when is the last time her hair was combed out? As I mentioned before in the previous slide, it should be combed out at least once a week, unless it's in a protective hairstyle. So asking those questions and then coming up with a follow-up plan if you know it hasn't been washed in a while, having that discussion. And so it's important. I'll move forward with some tips on how to have conversations with children and youth. So making hair care a topic of conversation during each of your monthly compliance visits, or at least once a month, however often you do meet with the foster youth, at least maybe once a month, checking in and asking about, making this a topic of the conversation and asking about who does their hair, how often is it done, what is done to it in regards to washing and styling and what products are used, asking if they like the way that they wear their hair, and if they do or don't, asking why or why not. If they don't like it, definitely, you know, asking follow-up questions. Is it just because it's just not their preference, or is it because they're being teased at school, or because it's pulling too tight on their hair, or it's causing their hair to fall out? So asking those questions, and asking if there's anything else that they would like to discuss in regards to their hair. So there may be something that's on their mind, and just giving them the space to discuss that with you is important. And also in regards to our foster youth, asking them if they have the products that they need for their hair, and asking them if they would like to learn how to style their hair and care for their hair. Within Black culture, we typically learn how to style our hair and do our hair from our mothers or other women in our families, or from our beauticians if we go to the hair salon. So asking them if they would like to learn how to different ways that they can style their hair. And of course there are many instructional videos on YouTube, but there may be another colleague who may be willing to help teach a foster youth that, or if you're at a group home, maybe you can have a licensed beautician come in to the group home and work with the girls there, provided training even with the staff. Same thing. So just keeping that in mind when working with our older teens, and providing them with the support that they need. So remember and keep in mind that some may be afraid or hesitant or even feel ashamed to discuss any issues that they may be having with their hair, and they may fail to report any issues because they may feel that because they may be getting teased or mistreated due to the condition of their hair, and they may feel that it's not important. They may be afraid of being rejected or dismissed, their concerns being dismissed. So giving them that space to bring up any concerns or desires that they may have is important. So I have similar tips on how to have discussion with caregivers, having a bring this topic up with them at least once a month, just to ensure that they have the support that they need to maintain the foster youth's hair, and that they understand the importance of it, and that your agency definitely promotes the appropriate hair care and consider it to be a matter of importance. So typically with this training, when it's in person, and I have everyone do a role play in pairs, which we are unable to do today with this format. But if you have time today, please feel free. I would encourage you to practice this with your colleagues, because the more you practice this, especially with someone that you trust and you're comfortable with, the more you practice this and build up your own language and confidence with this topic, the more likely you will translate that out with others, with your resource parents and other staff, and with our foster youth. And you don't have to have all of the answers. If a foster parent or foster youth asks a question and you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm glad you asked that question. I don't have the answer now, or I can't give you an answer now, but I will follow up on that with my supervisor, or I will follow up on that with my colleagues or coworkers, or I will try to find someone who can help you out in that area. So understand that it's okay to not know everything. It's okay to say, I don't understand, or asking a foster youth, you know, how did when you were with your family, when you were living with whoever they were living with before they came into care, what did they do to your hair? How did they care for your hair? So asking that question, and that can be initiate the conversation. And also asking their biological parents, how did they care for their child's hair? And then when you do the role play, consider what your worries are, or what was challenging for you, and what did you learn or gain from the role play. So what are some next steps that you can take? You can discuss this topic with your supervisor whenever you're assigned a case with Black foster youth, or if you're in probation with the Black probationer, juvenile probation. Develop a plan with your supervisor on how to address this topic with the caregiver and family, and also encourage or at least inform parents and relatives that they are allowed to do their children's hair during visits. So this will be a great activity to do during visits, because the parent takes on the parental role, they're caring for their child, and it involves nurturing and care and bonding. So, and it also gives the parent, it empowers them, because because it shows that they are still needed in the care of their child. Even though their child may not be in their custody, it's still needed and important. You can also discuss this topic with colleagues in order to get more ideas and feedback. So I have a video here in how, just as an example of what can be done next. So I'm not saying that you would necessarily do this, but this is just an example of how someone put this into action, saw this as a need, and came up with a solution. Oh, this one is not going to play either. Gosh. Okay, I apologize. This video is not going to play. So with this video, and also just to let you know that you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint and links for the videos so that you can watch them, okay? I apologize for the technical difficulties. So anyway, with this video, it shows a woman who is a beautician, a Black woman in Chicago who's a beautician, and she started a nonprofit where she provides hair education and also hair services for Black foster youth in foster care and in interracial adoptions. So she teaches and trains the caregivers on how to, of like regular maintenance for their child, for the foster youth's hair, and also and she also provides ongoing services if preferred. And so in the video, she talks about what prompted her to provide this service and develop this nonprofit. She also has an adoptive mom, a white woman who found this service to be very, 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 very beneficial for her family. And because she speaks about how she was afraid to ask for help. She didn't know. You know, at times it's like, okay, do I say Black or do I say African American? Will they be offended if I ask them to help me? Will they think that I'm stupid? And that, you know, because within Black culture, there are some who believe that there shouldn't be interracial adoptions. But there are some who have no problem with it. But the biggest issue is just the importance of ensuring that you do care and you understand the importance of properly caring for their hair. And so one of the foster youth speaks and says that you know, that she felt more confident. And when her hair was done, when she was able to go to this hair salon, it's called Styles for Kids, that she was able to go there and get her hair done, she felt more confident and she felt better. And so just keeping that in mind, I'll just move forward with the next. Actually, I have a poll question for you. As we think about these next steps and what can be done, I would like to know what next steps you will initiate after today's webinar. So, what can you do starting today? And select all that applies. You don't have to select just one. And let's see what everyone's plan is. You know, the goal and the purpose of this training is to compel you into action, into addressing this topic. So it looks like, wow, 71% say that you will discuss this topic with colleagues. Awesome. And you, over half, will seek more information on this topic. And wow, 61% you'll discuss it with youth and foster families. Yes. And discussing it with your employees, with your supervisor. Great. I'm loving the responses. That is awesome. That is the goal. Ultimate goal is to compel you into action and to get you all planning and working towards, you know, improving this issue for our Black foster youth. So, and I'll give a little bit of background for myself in the reason why I decided to develop this training. Well, I was already, because I had various incidents with our foster youth especially when they're in emergency shelter care, when they're in group homes, and when they're in foster homes, where the caregivers are of a different race, it tends to be an issue. And so at the time that I was developing this curriculum, I just so happened to be working with two different foster youth, Black foster youth. One was 13 and one was 17. So the 13-year-old had been homeless with her mom and living out on the street. And she had been just recently been removed and was placed in emergency shelter care. And when I went to the school to see her, after maybe like a week later, one of the school staff, I signed in, I was waiting for her to be taken out of class, and one of the school staff came up to me and said, "Oh, are you here to see so-and-so? Oh my gosh, she's just a totally different person. She gives eye contact, she's always smiling, and she's so outspoken now, and she always waves and says hello." And I mean, the teacher was just so elated and just so amazed at how much of a positive change it had been. And she was like, ever since she got her hair done, it's just been like she's just a totally different person now since she's gotten her hair done. And so that just confirmed for me the need for this training at that time. And then another story that I have is of this 17-year-old Black foster youth who was removed from her mom and placed in a home with a white foster mom who worked in high school with teens. And, but however, this foster youth, well, it's not funny, but when I think back on it, she gave this foster mom somewhat of a bad time. She locked herself in the room. She would refuse to come out. The foster mom was a teacher, and so she missed multiple days of work because the foster youth would not leave her room. Now, of course, there were other issues going on besides the issue with her hair, but no one knew that it was a hair issue until one day, until the social worker said, we can't continue on like this. What is going on? We need to find out what's going on, because you can't continue you have to go to school. You have to leave the house. You can't just stay in your room. And she said that she was embarrassed about her hair. She wanted to do her hair, but she didn't have what she needed to do it, and she didn't know what to do to it. So later that evening, even after hours, the dedicated social worker went back to the foster moms, got some products, went back to the foster mom's house, and helped the foster youth do her hair. And so after that, the foster youth was smiling. She actually ate dinner with the foster mom and didn't lock herself up in the room. She started going to school. Like, things changed dramatically. And now, of course, there were still some issues down the road that were going on, but just by helping her with that, take that next step, by affirming and validating her concern about her hair was important, and it did help enough that her way of responding to her environment changed, and it helped her with her adjustment to her new foster home and to her new school. So just keeping that in mind, those examples in mind, and I'm sure many of you have some examples as well. So here are some resources, just a few, and there's a plethora of resources online. There's a training workbook listed here, a website that has a list of products that can be used. And there's also, I attached an article here called Attachment Therapy. And so it's two ladies I believe they are staff, faculty at Cal State Northridge. And they developed a therapy that involves hair grooming and therapy simultaneously. So the foster parent or adoptive parent is caring for the child's hair while the foster youth is also engaging in therapy. So, and this was so that they're both in the therapy session together, and actually it occurs at the foster parent's home or adoptive parent home. So it just helps with improving attachment, and I thought it was pretty cool. So here's my contact information and my phone number and email. I do provide consultation services, training, and coaching for staff, resource parents, and helping with other issues as well, such as and training in other topics such as sex trafficking, other cultural issues. And so now we will move forward with our question and answer period.
Awesome. Tanisha, thank you so much. That was amazing. And I hope people can see there's really great discussions happening in the chat panel, lots of feedback, but also just great experiences that folks have had that are really helpful. So hopefully people can do that. I also just want to repeat, I know you mentioned this, but we will be sending a PowerPoint of the slides to all attendees. We will include the links to the videos because I believe they're all available on YouTube. Can rewatch those and watch the ones that we weren't able to see. And I again want to just thank Tanisha because I had her switch to a different laptop right as we were broadcasting the webinar, so we weren't able to make sure that those were working. I'm sure they probably would have worked on the other laptop. And this recorded webinar will also be archived on our website so folks can go back and rewatch and also share that link with colleagues or even with foster parents that they're working with. So lots of really great questions coming through, but we start with kind of the most important and basic, and that is, to your knowledge, is hair care a part of the basic training for foster parents? And does that training include the significance of hair care in maintaining the child's cultural identity?
To my knowledge, unfortunately, it is not a part of the basic training. It may be mentioned, but that's typically more of an advanced topic that is available. Well, I don't know about other counties, but in San Diego County, it is available. It's typically utilized by adoptive parents who are maybe adopting or interracial adoptions, but it is available for our foster parents here in San Diego, but it's not a part of the basic training, unfortunately, which is why this webinar is important, so that staff can provide that individual discussion with the foster parent, and hopefully one day in the future it will be incorporated into the basic training.
Thank you. And perhaps this is a great time for staff who are more interested in learning more to talk to management about seeing people like Tanisha into training to talk about how important this is. Tanisha, we got lots of questions about products and tools, and I know you mentioned moisturizing shampoo and conditioner and also oils, but do you have any just kind of quick off the bat, like go-to products or tools that you could recommend that folks could recommend for foster parents?
For combing, I would definitely suggest a wide tooth comb where the teeth are further apart. A wide tooth comb, a brush that is not too soft, but not too stiff, but somewhere in the middle, kind of depending on the texture. But if it's too soft, depending on the texture, it may not be as effective. In regards to oil, I mean, there's so many options out there, especially today, so many different products. But there's coconut oil, there's so many oils that come in liquid form where they have a spout where you can get it on the scalp, or you can, it also helps if you have like a spray bottle, depending on how they wear their hair. If they wear their hair natural, you can have a spray bottle with some water and the oil or whatever product that you use to moisturize their hair mixed together, and you can spray it on their hair. If they wear their hair straight, water is a no-no unless they're getting their hair washed or they're gonna be getting their hair done. So like when they go swimming, that's something else to be mindful of. It's summertime, you go to pool parties, you may want to put their hair in a protective style such as braids, because depending on the way they wear their hair, once you go swimming, you have to start all over again. Swim caps can help some, but most of the time they don't prevent our hair from getting wet as effectively. So other products, there's pink lotion I don't remember what it's called, but that's another option. I would just suggest, there's so many videos on YouTube. So checking out some videos on YouTube and it shows like different products there. In the resources that I provided, like the training workbook, they list some products, and the Foster Love Project does too. Some products are more pricier than others. So, I would say feel free to ask someone if you're at the store. I know Target has a section, depending on what part of town you live in. Target has a natural hair care section. Walmart does. Beauty stores like even Sally's and other, you can go to other stores where they sell products for Black hair. And if you see someone, just ask. Hopefully you'll get the right person. I mean, most people are pretty open to helping you out. So I would say don't be afraid to ask. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Any recommendations, Tanisha, for resources for homeless or at-risk Black youth, or even young adults who have aged out of the foster care system, and how hair care can be maintained in those situations?
That is difficult because, textured hair does require a bit more maintenance. However, I would definitely suggest for our homeless transitional age youth or foster youth to, if possible, if they are familiar with it, to wear their hair in its natural state. Because when you have chemicals on your hair, that it costs more money to maintain that. And if you're unable to maintain it regularly, it can result in your hair it can damage your hair significantly. So wearing their hair naturally, and water can help, as well as there are certain gels like, I can't remember the name of it. There's a type of gel that does not leave a lot of film on the hair, and it's cheap. It's on the cheaper end of pricing, but I can't remember the name of it. Oh, if you send me an email, whoever asked that, the persons that asked that question, I will. Oh, it's Eco Gel.
Yeah.
ECO, Eco Gel. So, and it can come in a bigger jar. It's cheap to buy, and it's not as it doesn't leave as much of a film after that, and water. And it also, of course, depends on the textured hair. It may be a bit more difficult for others than some. And more shampoo that will keep their hair moisturized. So it's just important that they keep their hair moisturized, because when it's dry, especially over time, it will break and get damaged. So just keeping in mind, it'll be easier to maintain if it's natural, and keeping it, they can braid it themselves, or they can twist it up themselves, and then they can take it out untwisted, and that kind of gives the curly look. That way they don't have to pay the cost will be much less for maintenance. And it is, more and more people are wearing their hair natural, so it is more accepted. And so they won't feel like, they're different from others because they're wearing their hair. And it is understand that it is a process, even psychologically, even for myself when I would transition, which I did multiple times, transition from wearing my hair straight to wearing it natural. It's a psychological transition as well, and building up that confidence to wear your hair in its natural state. So just keeping that in mind as well for our foster youth. Affirmation is very, very important, and helping them become confident in that.
Awesome, thank you. A couple great questions about recommendations or advice for sleeping, as far as specific pillowcases or head wraps.
So definitely a bonnet, a silk bonnet, which can be found even at Walmart and Target. It can also be, I'm sure you can order it online, or at beauty supply stores, you can find it there. A silk bonnet is very important to protect the hair, protect the moisture in the hair, help it retain moisture, and also protect the style, especially for little ones, and for all ages, really. I still wear one. Also, if you are able to, having a silk pillowcase that helps to retain the moisture, and whereas with cotton, it dries it out. And then also if you have, in addition to a silk bonnet, like a silk wrap that they can tie on their hair to help tie it down, because the bonnet is a bit looser. That helps to maintain the style of their hair as well.
Perfect, thank you. Last question that we have time for, although there are lots of great questions coming in. Any information about issues like lice or even alopecia being a greater risk, or how that might be treated in a foster care situation?
Yes, well, lice is not as common with in the Black population, although it's not impossible, but it does occur, but it's very rare, at least to my knowledge. I would definitely just suggest, I know there are products that treat lice that you can buy at the store, but it's not common with Black hair because we do use a lot of oils, which make it, to my understanding, which make it difficult for the lice to, be able to hold on. And because of the curliness of our hair, also makes it difficult. And following up maybe with a beautician that specializes with Black hair, or even like a junior college or a beauty school is another option, with getting more information on how to care for their hair, and especially in regards to alopecia, checking in with their dermatologist, a beautician that's licensed in working, with the specialty and working with clients that have alopecia, which you can hopefully either ask around or check with, instructors at a junior college or at beauty colleges, where they teach those things, checking websites and maybe groups on Facebook, on social media, finding someone that has an expertise in that area, especially for alopecia. That takes special care.
Perfect. Thank you. Tanisha, I want to thank you so much. I know this is a topic that you're very passionate about all the time. It's especially important and poignant right now. And so we are so grateful for you for doing this webinar, and also to the 300 participants that we had, for prioritizing this topic and for making time available to be here, and for the beautiful, wonderful conversations that are happening in the chat panel.
Yes, thank you.
Everyone for being here. I hope everyone has a lovely day. And again, you will receive all of this information in an email very shortly. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Take care.